This is a gloriously beautiful South Carolina day, and I'm speaking with Matt Johnson, who is the director of the Beidler Forest Audubon Center. Matt, thank you for letting us come. And it seems like we're in the middle of just the Garden of Eden, but actually we're between Columbia and Charleston, right off I-26, and there are signs that tell us how to get here.
That's right off of I-26. Whether you're coming from Charleston or from Columbia, you can find us. We're a little off the beaten path, which we like, but what a beautiful place, what a beautiful day. We're here in the spring, which is my favorite time of the year. And welcome to the Beidler Forest Audubon Center. It's 18,000 acres of land here in the Four-Hole Swamp watershed. Takes up parts of Dorchester, Berkeley, and Orangeburg counties.
How did it start? When did y'all acquire the original property?
Sure. So in the 1960s, this property was originally protected, and it was only about 3,500 acres at the time. Never been logged, never been significantly impacted by people. And the Audubon Society and the Nature Conservancy got together and protected it and purchased it from the Beidler family, who owned a lot of land in this area, but had not logged or really done anything with this little part of Four-Hole Swamp. So it was protected in the 1960s. We opened it up to the public for the first time in the mid-1970s, and we're still open today. And we've turned that 3,500 acres into over 18,000 acres of protected land today.
Explain to me what a swamp is and what the impact of this is, how much drainage comes into it.
Good question. So swamps really at the basic level are flooded forests. You combine trees, you combine water. This particular swamp, Four-Hole Swamp, is fed entirely by rainfall. It starts up near St. Matthews, an area that you know, and it runs for about 60 miles down eventually into the Edisto River near the town of Ridgeville. And being fed entirely by rainfall, you have a really vast area that really floods down to a sort of a more narrow area. So a couple 100,000 acres of land that drains down to about 30 or 40,000 acres that makes up the flow of the swamp.
And so why is that so important that we have all these trees and obstacles, I guess I'd say, to the flow of water? And what impact does that have on cleanliness and creating habitat?
Right, great question. And we think about, the habitat that swamps provides. We think about habitat for wildlife, right? And certainly this is a sanctuary for birds, and us being Audubon, we always care about the birds and other wildlife as well, but swamps and other wetlands serve some really important functions also. One of them is they make the water cleaner. So when water flows through swamps, it's cleaner when it leaves than when it comes in. Swamps naturally filter and purify water. So the more wetlands we have, the cleaner our water is, especially if that water is a source of our drinking water. And in a lot of cases it is.
So because it's slow here, the impurities can filter down into the ground, and that incredible biome, the organisms that are under the ground are just so remarkable at degrading any impurities and turning them into usable nutrients.
That's exactly right. And when I talk to people here at Beidler, and I say, you look out and you see an ecosystem, but under the water and under the ground, there's a whole other ecosystem that we really can't see that's doing really important work for us, filtering water. You talk about the slow-moving water. All these extreme weather events that we've had in recent years in South Carolina, swamps and the wetlands do a really important role during that.
Well, we're surrounded by trees, and we had a meeting tree that we saw that you said was probably well over 1,000 years old. And as we look around, I see a tiny little young cypress tree. So we're not going to see all gigantic trees because there have been natural occurrences such as hurricanes.
That's exactly right. So when we think about there hasn't been any logging here, it doesn't mean that no trees have fell. So one of the hallmarks of an old growth swamp is, yes, you do get some old trees, but usually you have things of every stage of life and death. Lots of standing trees, but also lots of dead trees. And so our sort of mission here at Beidler is completely hands-off. We let the swamp be as natural as it is. And so if a hurricane comes and it knocks a tree down, we leave it on the ground. If a lightning strikes a tree and causes it to catch fire, we leave it standing. The only time we cut a tree is if it falls across the boardwalk, yes. And then we leave everything on the ground in the swamp. So it's a very natural ecosystem because, as you know, Amanda, a fallen tree is still very valuable to wildlife.
Oh, my word in heavens, absolutely, yeah. But we also have the factor of carbon storage, not only with what we see here, but I know I've been doing some work in my yard and trying to plant some things, and oh my Lord, the root systems of things are just incredible.
That's exactly right. I mean, especially when we think about native plants, native trees, native grasses, they store incredible amounts of carbon. And so when we think about a changing climate, the more carbon we can store, the better. So a very important role that Beidler and other forests and wetlands are playing is storing carbon, not just above ground, but to your point, a lot of that carbon storage is below the surface of the ground.
Because it had never been logged, I mean, this was a kind of unknown, unused area. And y'all have been doing history and getting designations and accolades for things here. And one of the most recent interesting things, I think, is you found out that this was a place that had a role in the Underground Railroad system when enslaved people were trying to get to places where they would be able to live as freed people.
That's exactly right. So Beidler, we're very proud to be a Ramsar wetland of international importance. This is a national natural landmark. It's a globally important bird area.
Globally important.
Yes, but also, and I think perhaps we're most proud of, our most recent designation is that Beidler was named as a site on the National Park Service's Underground Railroad Network to Freedom program, and you're exactly right. We have evidence now that freedom seekers that were referred to as maroons lived in and traveled through swamps, including Four Hole Swamp, as they were trying to become free. And they would have, some may have stayed here for short periods of time, others built encampments and lived in the swamp. So it was truly a sanctuary, as people tried to get away from that very horrible thing that was happening.
And of course there was no boardwalk, so highly unlikely that people were going to be passing through here. When you were in here, you were very unlikely to run into anybody else.
Yes.
And anybody looking for you was very unlikely to come into this because, as you said, this is where, when we're here right now, is one of the lowest of water levels that you see during the year.
Sure, right, very dry. And what's amazing about coming here and walking on our boardwalk, so we have an almost 2-mile boardwalk that goes out into the old growth parts of the swamp, is that you can visualize what it would have looked like 200 years ago, 500 years ago, and it's changed some, but not a lot, to people that might have used the swamp, whether they be maroons, whether they be Native Americans. And you can touch trees like the meeting tree that have been alive for 1,000 years, and you might think that people that were here in the past put their hands against that very same tree and it's still alive and still here today. One
of the cool things about cypress trees, of course, is in wet areas they put up those knees, and you say that because of that we can talk about this unusual bird that sometimes takes advantage of those.
That's exactly right. We have this really unique species here, and at this time of the year, here we are in early April, people are coming out here to see it. It's called the prothonotary warbler. It's a tricky name, and I guess maybe the better pronunciation would be prothonotary.
Oh.
And a prothonotary was a clerk in the Roman Catholic Church that wore these bright yellow flowing robes. And so it was reminiscent of the appearance of this bird, which is bright yellow. But the other nickname for it is the swamp canary.
Swamp canary.
And I think it's a good nickname, not only because the bird's bright yellow like canary, but like the canary of the coal mine, these birds are a great indicator of the health of a wetland ecosystem. We tend to see them growing or living in areas where there's standing water, so they're susceptible to changes in hydrology, to changes in the flow of the water. They also eat things like we were looking at a mayfly
Yes.
earlier. Mayflies come up out of the water as part of their life, and they are also tied to water quality. So in areas where the water is not very clean, sometimes you don't have quite as many mayflies, and that can impact the food web as it applies to this very special bird of ours.
Because birds, almost all birds like to feed their young insects because they need that protein.
That's right.
Because they have to get up and learn how to fly and mature very quickly. And this bird, I think, really speeds up that process.
Speeds it up very quickly. So we see them nesting in the cypress knees, and here the cypress knees are so big and old that they start to hollow out. And then these warblers, which is interesting because it's the only warbler in the eastern United States that nests in cavities. All the other warblers build an open nest. Only the prothonotary will nest inside of a structure. So you can actually put, if you took your bluebird box, Amanda, and you put it out into a swamp, it
Guess
becomes
what
a
I get?
prothonotary warbler box.
Yeah.
But here they nest in the cypress knees, and it is amazing. We see them nesting.
But they do create a nest. They do
make
collect,
a nest.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
inside
Okay.
of the structure.
Okay.
Good point. And what's amazing is they do everything very quickly. So from when they start to lay eggs in the nest until when those young are big enough to leave the nest is only 3 weeks.
Gosh, that's fast.
So fast. And actually from when the eggs hatch to when they can leave the nest is 10 days.
In the way that we think about the monarch butterflies, and at first we just thought plant milkweed, milkweed, plant milkweed. Then we realized, well, if we can do that, but if they don't have the other end of their migratory route, it's not safe. We've got to start looking at what's happening there. And so y'all didn't know quite what the prothonotaries were doing when they left. And I think you've done some fascinating work to figure out what is going on. So tell us about that.
Sure. I've been lucky enough to be working with this species for the time that I've worked for Audubon. And yeah, they arrive in about the beginning of April. They nest here at Beidler. We think we've done a pretty good job of protecting habitat for them while they're here. And then they leave in late July and August. But where do they go? And we think at a global, or at a global scale, their populations are declining. And so the question was why? And when we think about bird conservation, especially for these birds that migrate,
yes,
as to your point, we can't just protect one piece of their habitat. We got to piece together the whole journey, but first we have to understand what that journey is. So we have been for the last couple of years studying the birds here at Beidler as part of a project being done across their range. So working with partners in Virginia and Ohio and Louisiana and Arkansas and all over to attach these little tracking devices to these birds to actually study their migration. And so we did that for
Like a little backpack?
Like a little backpack. It goes on their back. It's not a GPS unit, so the catch is we put it on the bird in 1 year. Bird flies off. It goes on this journey. It comes back, hopefully. And what's amazing about prothonotaries is they will come back to the same spot year after year after year. And then we can catch them again and remove this device and then hopefully get the data that tells us where they went. And so they're migrating at night. And they're migrating across the Gulf of Mexico, across the Caribbean, down through Central America, into like Colombia, South America. That's a one-way trip of about 2,500 miles.
And then coming back.
And then coming back. So
wow,
5,000 miles. These birds weigh about 15 grams, which is, if you imagine, like 2 quarters in your hand. The little devices that we've been putting on them are like half of a gram. And through this little device, we've been able to learn quite a bit about where they go and how they're getting there. And so now we're working with partners in places like Colombia, South America, to talk about habitat protection, to understand what the prothonotary warblers are doing down there, so that really we can hopefully protect their full life cycle. The breeding grounds, the wintering grounds,
yes,
and everything in between.
And everything in between, because they've got to stop and eat and rest and do all that.
Right.
If you drive 2,500 miles, you can't do that in a day.
Right.
It's not an airplane trip for them.
And it just is, it still never ceases to amaze me how these little tiny birds can travel 5,000 miles and not just come back to Beidler, but some of them come back to the exact same cavity from 1 year to the next.
Goodness. Site loyalty.
Site loyalty
Yeah.
or site fidelity.
Fidelity.
And we
yeah,
see that with salmon and fish and all sorts of different
Yeah, that's true.
organisms
Yeah,
do that. And yet these little
Eels,
birds
yeah,
do it too.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
exactly right.
yeah. Something we haven't talked about is just the joy for human beings to come here and have this experience. I mean, my anxiety level is dramatically lower than it was earlier, and I know that y'all have had limited visitation during the pandemic, but even during normal times when you can have a lot of people here, it's such a large area and there's so much to do that there is anybody can get a sense of tranquility and peace and calm and come and have this experience that just isn't there in many other places.
That's exactly right. You know, one of the things I love about Beidler is it's a great way to experience all the senses. Like we're listening to birds in the background and take deep breaths out here and just a nice fresh scent, because of course these trees are also an oxygen factory here in the swamp.
You know, you were walking around, we saw all kinds of snakes, we saw all kinds of insects, you know, we saw crawdads. I mean, it's just
such a great place to
caterpillars,
explore,
yeah,
to let your imagination
yeah,
run wild.
Yeah.
So yes, we are open to the public. Right now we're open Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays. People can register to come out on our website and explore this boardwalk, which is, as I said, is almost 2 miles in length. It makes a big loop right out into the old growth parts of the swamp. And during the pandemic, we opened a new trail system that goes through some of the habitats that we're restoring, longleaf pine and native grasslands near the entrance to Beidler. So we have lots of things for people to do here.
Okay. The only thing that you can't do here is run out and buy a hamburger. So bring a picnic lunch.
Bring a picnic lunch. We have picnic tables. It's a great place to come and spend the day, spend the afternoon or the morning, but it's a good place to bring a snack and some water with you.
Well, it has just been wonderful. Thank you for the work that y'all are doing here and for the opportunity to let South Carolinians and people from all over the country understand the importance of a place being preserved and how it ties in so much farther than just a place halfway between Columbia and Charleston.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Amanda, for your interest, and we'd love to have everybody come out and visit.